Okay, let's make a start. Hello, everyone, from wherever you are joining us today. We are very happy to have so many of you join us at such short notice for this event, which is actually a supporting event of another much bigger event, which is happening at the same time at the University of São Paulo Law School, which, as you know, is also the university where I studied law. I was actually, I like to repeat that, and I used to do that with some pride. Now I do it with some concern, but I like to repeat that I was in the first cohort of students to study the whole 5 years of law school under the new Constitution of 1988, which we thought was the great turning point in Brazil, in Brazil's redemocratization after 20 years of military dictatorship. We cannot call it any other way, despite some people still trying to do so in Brazil. So it was a really happy moment. We were there in 1988, 1989, 1990, thinking, how are we going to rebuild our democracy? And I think we did a reasonably good job, not a perfect job, obviously, during the first 30 years or so. There was very many problems that are actually expressed in the letter that we'll be reading today. But we did consolidate a lot of democratic institutions during that time. Social norms and the culture of democracy, I think, were also improved during those first 30 years. I went around the world, as many of you who are here now know, invitations from you to go around, talk about Brazil's constitution, about the right to health in Article 196, and how the courts were implementing that right, how important the institution of the judiciary was or was not. We disagreed about that in implementing those new rights of the Constitution. So despite all the criticisms I and others had about the process and how slow it went and how incomplete it was, we had at least that idea that things are moving forward. So it's with a lot of concern that I do this today on the 11th of August, which is also the date when the two main law schools, first law schools in Brazil were founded, the one in São Paulo and the one in Recife, and we should be celebrating rather than reading a letter of concern. But I'm also very happy with how people have responded to this. And as you'll see in the letter at the end, many of you have already read it, it ends with a phrase which I think represents and illustrates really well what we are doing here. They talk about a civic vigil for democracy. And I think that's really important because for a long time, I had the impression that the risks to the democratic process in Brazil and in other parts of the world as well were being watched by people without reaction, like just dormant, thinking, oh, no, like this is not that bad, like things will get better. And you'll see like our institutions are resilient. Many people wrote, including good friends of mine, like Oscar Vilhena, for instance, who is in this fight with us now about the Brazilian resilient constitution. But I think it's clear to everyone now that without a vigil, without us watching over what is happening and giving a strong message out there that we are here. We are not going to allow this to happen while we look the other way. I think it's very important. So I think that it's also a moment, I think, of happiness because of this kind of awakening of Brazilian society and also the world society. And this is what you are representing here. I was really glad this morning and just now to give a couple of interviews to the press, explaining the importance and the readiness of the support that you gave to us today in this event. So I can see already, and I know that some of you have to go, so I start with those who indicated to me that they are a bit pressed for time, but I can see people from the US, Norway, Argentina, and many other parts of the UK as well joining us today, which makes me very happy. And I would also want to acknowledge, I know you cannot see it because you're only seeing me, unfortunately, but we have several people here also in our room who are participating in this, and I really appreciate your presence here today with us. So what I want to do, this is a very informal event, as you can see. We are following things in Brazil, and we wanted our reading to be simultaneous with the reading of the letter there. I have a couple of colleagues who you know really well, Conrado Mendes and Diogo Coutinho, who are actually at the events in São Paulo and Rio, and they will try to log in later to tell us a bit about the climate or what's happening there in those events. But before we do the reading of the letter, which I will do at 3:30, I would like to hear from you a few words of why you decided to sign this letter, why you thought it was important to be here today, to leave whatever you were doing, to be with us today here on this day, which I hope proves to be historic for the Brazilian democracy. So I'll start with Roberto Gargarella, who is a dear friend from Argentina, from the University of Buenos Aires, and who has been together in many projects. So Roberto, I'm really happy that you are here with us. If you could say a few words to us in this moment, it would be great.
No, just give us the support from here, and also say that I, as many of my colleagues here, we are very concerned about the situation in Brazil and what may happen. First, because we learn from history, and we know that what happened in the United States at the end of Trump's government would be repeated in Brazil, not because the democratic community doesn't support democracy, but that the fact is that always there are a group of small groups of fanatics and extremists, and that they may create this also when they have the support from above. So, and this happened during the Trump's era and may happen now at the end of Bolsonaro's government. Oh, and second, I am concerned, particularly at this time, which is a time of democratic erosion, but I should say that the idea of democratic erosion, I mean, we in Latin America, we are suffering from this phenomenon, I mean, from the very origins of our constitutional life. So many study and are concerned and worried about the erosion of democratic institutions, as if it's a new phenomenon that came after the 11th of September with the authoritarianism in the United States. But the truth is that we have in our institutional structures, I mean, inbuilt some imbalances that create this situation of erosion. So those who are in the executive power have the ability, the capacity, the means to start eroding the system from inside. So at this time, where the phenomenon is exacerbated, I am particularly worried. And so because of that, I really wanted to give the kind of support an academic can give, which is say that we are paying attention to this situation and that we are very worried, me, myself, and many of my colleagues in the public university here. So all our support from here, and good luck.
Thank you very much, Roberto. Your support is really appreciated and welcome. I will move to Alicia. Alicia, can you hear us? Are you? So can you say a few words? Alicia is from Harvard University. We've been together in several projects for the past 2 decades. I'm really happy to see you here, Alicia. And thank you so much for your support in this cause. So what could you say to us from where you are about this event today?
Well, first of all, thank you, Octavio, for including me. I guess picking up on what Roberto was saying, I think most people in the United States who think about these issues a lot of the time believe that what happened at the end of the Trump administration was a dress rehearsal and a signal, just the tip of the iceberg for a much broader campaign to undermine our liberal democracy. And I think it shook many of us out of complacency about the strength of our institutions. So we are I'm very concerned about Brazil, both because it's Brazil and because I think it's an important leader in the region and signals support for democratic principles beyond the country, as well as obviously the Constitution representing a great conquest. But also because of the contagion factor from the United States, which I think we have to take responsibility for. So I'm glad to be here and to support this in any way. And I think that everybody who cares about democracy, not just in Brazil, should be aware of what is going on.
Thank you, Alicia, so much. I agree with every single word that you said there. So I'm gonna call now. We are getting closer to the time when we'll read the letter. So I'll call David Trubeck and then Siri Gloppen, and then we'll have a break and read the letter, and then we'll go back to whoever can stay a bit longer and talk about this. I can see Vinicius Carvalho is there. Thanks, Vinicius. And we have Natasha Lindstedt here as well, who will be talking to us about this global problem of democratic erosion. So I'll move on to an expert in the topic and who is together with us here at King's in a project which we have just launched called GLAD, Global Resistance to Authoritarian Diffusion, who is David Trubeck. David, thank you so much for being here, and please share with us your thoughts.
Thanks a lot. Unlike, I suppose, most of you, I actually lived through the coup in the original coup. I was working in the State Department when it occurred. I remember being in Washington and getting the cables, and I ended up living in Brazil for the early years. So I lived closely to Brazilian authoritarianism in a very frightening time and a very terrible period, both in Brazilian history and in American history, because we supported the coup, as you all know. And ever since then, having seen this horror, I've been concerned about democracy in Brazil as well as in the United States. And I, of course, was delighted when the generals were overthrown and this new constitutional regime emerged. And we are very proud of that, and you should be very proud of it, and so on. Today, here we are in a situation which, as Alicia pointed out, the United States is suffering from similar problems to those that are referred to in the letter. And indeed, I think the letter is a little too nice about the United States, to be honest, because it's really a worry here. What we found out is that autocracy diffuses, authoritarianism is linked around the world, just as we are hoping that democracy will be linked around the world. And what we need in this time is an expression of transnational solidarity among those who fight to preserve democracy and the rule of law. And this event is an example of the kind of transnational solidarity that we need to maintain. And our new project on global diffusion will also do that and do it in some depth. So I'm very proud to be a signator and to be participating in an event which is a clear expression of the kind of transnational solidarity in the name of democracy and the rule of law that we need over and over again.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. Again, your support is really appreciated. And I think for Brazil, at least, it's a great timing for us to start that new project that you have kindly invited me to participate in. I'm gonna call Siri now, who is a dear friend from Norway, Bergen. Again, like Alicia, we've been together in many projects, and I'm sure we'll be in the future as well. And I'm so glad to see you here with us. I just wanted, before we start, to share, unfortunately, we cannot see, but the law school in São Paulo is packed. The square, which is just outside of the law school, cannot hold any more people. And they are having speeches there before they do the reading of the letter inside the law school. But let's hear from Siri Gloppen from the University of Bergen. Hi, Siri.
Hello, Octavio. Thank you so much for this very, very important initiative and for including me and inviting me to be a part. I think it's interesting to hear from Roberto and Alicia and David, because I think we all feel a lot the same way, that this is important for Brazil, but it's also important for the rest of the world. And I think we all have this sense that democracy, even in Norway, that we have a sense that democracy is a lot more fragile, and that we still don't fully understand the mechanisms of erosion. We don't really understand how it could unravel so quickly. We're starting to understand it, but I think as a scholarly community, it is very important to come together across countries to do research together, but also to express solidarity and to gain strength from each other as well, and to understand better how to create resistance, how resistance is being done. And this is, of course, a very important and powerful way of doing resistance. So I just want to thank you for including me, and I look forward to the reading.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Siri. So nice to see you. I think we should start getting ready to read the letter. And then afterwards, I will carry on calling more people to speak. I think one of the things that we thought would be nice when I spoke to people in São Paulo, Rio, is to try and do it simultaneously everywhere. So I will try to put a spotlight on. Can I click that? Man, can you bring some water?
Yes, that's fine. So
Okay.
that's just you now, that's just us.
Yes, okay. Okay, maybe we have a few more seconds. I'll just clear my. Thank you. Thank you so much. Do you want to sit really closer to be together? I think we have time to hear from someone else before we move on to reading the letter, because I'm hearing from Conrado here that it hasn't yet started, but it's about to start. Okay, so we'll wait and start. I think it's 35 minutes past. Okay, so I think we can start. Letter to Brazilians in defense of the democratic rule of law. London, August 11th, 2022. In August 1977, amidst the celebrations of the sesquicentennial of the foundation of the law schools in Brazil, Professor Goffredo da Silva Teles Jr., master of all of us in the free territory of Largo de São Francisco, read a letter to Brazilians in which he denounced the illegitimacy of the then military government and the state of exception in which we live. It also called for the reestablishment of the rule of law and the convening of a national constituent assembly. The seed planted bore fruit. Brazil overcame the military dictatorship. The National Constituent Assembly rescued the legitimacy of our institutions, reestablishing the democratic rule of law with the prevalence of respect for fundamental rights. We have the powers of the Republic, the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary, all independent, autonomous, and committed to respecting and ensuring compliance with the greater covenant, the Federal Constitution. Under the mantle of the Federal Constitution of 1988, which is about to complete its 34th anniversary, we went through free and periodic elections, in which the political debate on projects for the country has always been democratic, with the final decision being left to popular sovereignty. Goffredo's lesson is embodied in our Constitution. I quote, "All power emanates from the people, who exercise it through their elected representatives or directly under the terms of this Constitution," end of quote. Our elections with the electronic counting process have served as an example to the world. We had several alternations of power which respected the results of the polls and led to a Republican transition of government. Electronic voting machines, as well as the electoral justice, proved to be safe and reliable. Our democracy has grown and matured, but much remains to be done. We live in a country of profound social inequalities, with deficits in essential public services such as health, education, housing, and public safety. We have a long way to go in developing our economic potential in a sustainable way. The state is inefficient in the face of its numerous challenges. Demands for greater respect and equality of conditions in terms of race, gender, and sexual orientation are still far from being fully met. In the coming days, in the midst of these challenges, we will have the beginning of the electoral campaign to renew the mandates of state and federal legislatures and executives. At this moment, we should have the apex of democracy with the dispute between the various political projects aimed at convincing the electorate of the best proposal for the direction of the country in the coming years. Instead of a civic celebration, we are going through a moment of immense danger to democratic normality, of risk to the institutions of the Republic, and of insinuations of contempt for the results of the elections. Groundless attacks, unaccompanied by evidence, question the fairness of the electoral process and the democratic rule of law so hard won by Brazilian society. Threats to other powers and sectors of civil society and the incitement to violence and the breakdown of the constitutional order are intolerable. We have recently witnessed authoritarian reigns that have jeopardized secular American democracy. Their attempts to destabilize democracy and the people's confidence in the fairness of the elections were unsuccessful. Here, they won't be either. Our civic conscience is much greater than the opponents of democracy imagine. We know how to put aside minor differences in favor of something much bigger, the defense of the democratic order. Imbued with the civic spirit that underpinned the 1977 letter to Brazilians and gathered in the same free territory of São Francisco, we are gathered here in the free territory of King's College London, regardless of the electoral or partisan preference of each one of us, we call on Brazilians to be alert in defense of democracy and respect for the election result. In today's Brazil, there is no more room for authoritarian setbacks. Dictatorship and torture belong to the past. The solution to the immense challenges facing Brazilian society necessarily involves respect for the results of the election. In civic vigil against attempts at ruptures, we cry out in unison. If we could all cry out in unison now, democratic rule of law always. Democratic rule of law always. Thank you very much. Thank you. Just now, briefly, in respect of all the people who supported us, and I know that we haven't been able to add all the names of people to this list because we kept receiving names, and I really thank Omri Levin, our research assistant at the TLI, who is joining us from France now, for the hard work in updating the letter continuously. But I want to read that list of the support of the first 20 or so people who signed the letter. So as well as the Transnational Law Institute here at King's College London, the King's Observatory of Democracy in Latin America, CODLA, and the King's Brazil Institute, we had Professor Richard Abel from UCLA, Dr. Emily Barrett from King's College London, Professor Boyan Bugaric from University of Sheffield, Dr. Francisco Domingues from Middlesex University, Professor Kit Ewing from King's College London, Professor Roberto Gagarella from University of Buenos Aires, Justice Baltazar Garzón from Spain, Professor Siri Gloppen from University of Bergen, Megan Hawkes from King's College London, who I really thank for helping me putting this together in record time. You're brilliant at that. Professor Dan Hunter, King's College London, our new dean, Sir Jeffrey Jowell from UCL, University College London and Blackstone's Chambers, Professor Jeff King, University College London, Omri Levin, King's College London, Professor Natasha Lindstedt, University of Essex, here next to me, Dr. Ewan Magogi, King's College London, Richard Miran, Lee Day Law Firm, Professor David Nelken, King's College, Professor Ole Friedhof Norheim, University of Bergen and Harvard, Team OTQC, Blackstone's Chambers, Professor Eva Pilt, King's College London, Dr. Josh Platsky Miller, University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, in University of Cambridge, Professor Martin Raw, New York University, Professor David Trubeck, University of Wisconsin-Madison, Professor David Triss, King's Brazil Institute, Professor Bruce Wilson, University of Central Florida, and last but not least, Alicia Yaming from Harvard University, who is only last because her surname starts with Y, and I'm sure she is quite used to that. So thank you very much. Whoever can stay a bit longer, we will have now some words from Natasha Lindstedt, who is here with us, and then we will talk to Vinicius, if he's still there with us, and then open the floor for anyone who wants to say something on this day, including the people who are here with us in the room. Natasha, do you want to?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me today. I was very happy to accept and to come in person. This is something that is incredibly important to me. We're seeing that autocratization has been really haunting the world. We have more and more people living in non-democratic regimes than in democracies, and more countries are non-democracies. It especially has been affecting these really big countries like India, like the US, like Brazil. And we're seeing in the case of Brazil, there's this sustained and coordinated threat to democracy. And this has huge effects on citizens, on their respect for human rights, on respect for the rule of law, good governance, just tackling social and economic inequalities. And one of the trends that I find most alarming that's affecting the US, but of course is also affecting Brazil, is that we have these would-be autocrats that are sowing the seeds of doubt in our institutions, in elections. There are election deniers that are winning primaries in the US. This is just completely unacceptable and unthinkable, because that's the one thing that differentiates a democracy from an autocracy. And also problematic is these leaders are fomenting this political culture that is just completely intolerant and goes against democratic values. So I was happy to support this initiative today, and I really appreciate that I was invited to do so.
Thank you, Natasha, very much. Natasha is also part of the grad that we have just started. So it was really nice to meet you today for the first time. Let's go now to Vinicius Mariano de Carvalho, who I believe is somewhere in Latin America at the moment, and who is also the current director of the Brazil Institute, and also the initiator of CODLA, the King's Observatory of Democracy in Latin America, which again is a very timely initiative. Vinicius.
Thank you very much, Octavio. And again, thank you all the team that put together this event today. It's a great pleasure and honor to host that together with the Transnational Law Institute, the Brazil Institute, and the Observatory of Democracy in Latin America. I'm talking to you now from Ecuador, where I am here also working for CODLA for our observatory during this week. This event today is quite remarkable and important because it reminds us that we should never take democracy for granted. It's a process, a continuous process of construction, a continuous process of perfectioning and learning with the mistakes that we make. Myself, I'm a son of the transition period from the dictatorship to the democracy in Brazil, engaging politically as a young student as well at that time in building up a democratic regime for the country. And today, as director of Brazil Institute, in my last month as director of the Institute, it is for me a great honor to, together with Octavio, organize and put this event, reminding us our main task at the university is this task of not only research, but also keeping the education for democracy, keeping the education process and learning that we cannot just rest and believe that democracy is built, but we constantly need to be looking at the new generations that are coming to us, working with them, learning with them the new forms of democracy, not forgetting that we act democratically in several ways, first and foremost through the elections, through the act of voting, but also participating in events like that, reminding that the voice of people must be heard anywhere, and especially when it means that it is for the construction and the consolidation of this fragile and precious thing that's democracy. Thank you very much again, all of you that joined us today. Thank you very much, Octavio, for the partnership in this work. And please follow our work at the Observatory of Democracy in Latin America, because we believe that we have a mission to do here. And again, to consolidate not only for Brazil in our case, but for the entire Latin American continent and contribute to the construction of this democratic process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vinicius. I'm in touch here now with Diogo and Conrado to see if they can join, but apparently it's so overwhelming there and with so many people that they are having difficulties even keeping in touch with us. So are we able? Oh no, we cannot put the link, can we? To the to share the link of what's happening there in Brazil now, because there is a live.
Share the screen. If you have live stream on YouTube, I can share the screen on the screen.
Yeah. Conrado is saying here, I'm sorry, I'm in the middle of the crowd, and it's really it's worse than talking, apparently.
Okay,
in
that's not
Brazil. I sent it to your email, the link as well. And so I do have an email of that.
okay.
So we went with seeing what's happening there. Yeah. And we'll share.
Vamos acomodando, todos em todos os seus lugares. E agora sim, com muita emoção, que nesse dia 11 de agosto de 2022, temos a honra de dar início. É assim mesmo, é muita emoção, é muita gente chegando. Temos a honra de dar início ao ato de leitura à Carta dos Brasileiras e Brasileiros em defesa do Estado Democrático de Direito, uma iniciativa de antigos alunos que foi carinhosamente encampada por essa casa. Nosso compromisso de vida com a democracia assim o exigiu, e hoje nos reunimos novamente no exato local onde há 45 anos foi lida a primeira carta aos brasileiros. Nós saudamos não só todas as pessoas reunidas aqui no Pátio das Arcadas, mas também todas aquelas que estão nos assistindo pelos telões do Largo de São Francisco, em vários pontos da cidade de São Paulo e do Brasil. Esse ato está sendo transmitido pelo canal oficial da Faculdade de Direito e atos simultâneos estão sendo realizados em todas as capitais do país. O pátio da faculdade ficou pequeno. Hoje, a Carta às Brasileiras e Brasileiros em defesa do Estado Democrático de Direito já tem mais de 900 mil assinaturas e chegaremos em muito tempo. É uma ampla adesão que reforça o caráter republicano, democrático e diverso da Carta e deste ato. E, para a nossa primeira leitura, primeira fala do ato, considerando que estudantes são a razão de ser da faculdade, chamamos ao púlpito a presidenta do Centro Acadêmico 11 de agosto, Manuela Moraes.
Prezados e prezadas, tenho nome, me chamo Manuela Moraes. Sou presidente do Centro Acadêmico 11 de agosto e, em nome da nossa entidade, saúdo todas as organizações, estudantes e personalidades presentes nesse espaço. Não há dúvidas do marco histórico que a presença de cada um aqui representa. Como a primeira entidade estudantil fundada no Brasil, consideramos que era preferível que não houvesse, após 45 anos, a necessidade de uma nova Carta aos Brasileiros. Hoje, no entanto, surge como tarefa democrática a união de diversos setores da sociedade para defender as liberdades e os direitos pelos quais uma geração inteira de lutadores deram a vida para conquistar. É por essa razão que nos congregamos hoje. Além dessa tarefa, faz-se necessária uma nova Carta aos Brasileiros e Brasileiras para atualizá-la frente ao novo paradigma de lutas que estão colocadas na atual realidade nacional. Se antes as universidades eram para poucos, hoje novos rostos, cores e saberes diversificam os espaços de poder político e intelectual no Brasil. Nós, que éramos os outros, agora fazemos parte dessa nova carta. Somos jovens, negros, periféricos, uma nova intelectualidade que é fruto da escola pública, das quebradas e das favelas. Temos lutado permanentemente para garantir que essas conquistas sejam um ponto de não retorno e não uma exceção à regra. E é por isso que nos sentimos honrados em sintetizar nesse espaço a explosão de potência e de possibilidades que um Brasil popular pode representar. O dia 11 de agosto, nesse contexto, não deve ser apenas uma reação frente às intenções golpistas que rolam no Brasil, mas sim uma assembleia na qual aqueles e aquelas que se indignam com a injustiça do nosso tempo realizam um pacto coletivo para pensar para além da democracia atualmente existente. Dessa maneira, é preciso ousar sonhar e caminhar no sentido da luta por uma democracia ainda inexistente no país. Não queremos a democracia da fome, a democracia das chacinas e tampouco a democracia dos ricos. Queremos a antítese da democracia que temos hoje. Em outros termos, a democracia da diversidade, a democracia dos trabalhadores, uma democracia real. Queremos a democracia dos povos, a democracia de todos os povos e todos os povos na democracia. Não somos ingênuos ou irresponsáveis. Sabemos que o caminho para esse projeto passa pela luta contra qualquer retrocesso na nossa atual ordem política. Trilhar o caminho da nossa luta é mais tranquilo se não houver obstáculos na estrada. E caminhar juntos é imprescindível. Entendemos que ser jovem, como nós somos, é não ter medo de denunciar o governo que quer implodir as pontes existentes no nosso caminho até a democracia real. Jair Bolsonaro ataca as liberdades democráticas não apenas quando questiona a segurança das urnas ou quando vocifera frente às instituições. Os cortes bilionários nos recursos da educação também são um ataque à democracia. A democracia sangra quando o governo nomeia interventores nas reitorias das nossas universidades. A democracia... A democracia é sequestrada quando faltam vacinas. Quando, em meio ao crescimento do desemprego e da desigualdade social, não há taxação de grandes fortunas. O povo, e portanto a democracia, morrem quando 1% concentra a riqueza do restante das brasileiras e dos brasileiros. É por isso que a defesa democrática não pode ser uma abstração formal. Deve ser, na realidade, uma luta material pelo direito ao pão e pelo direito à poesia. Só assim será possível honrar o sangue dos jovens que sacrificaram as suas vidas por esse sonho. Nesse sentido, como representante dessa juventude que sonha, saúdo parte daqueles estudantes da São Francisco e da Universidade de São Paulo que deram a própria juventude para que a nossa voz ecoasse no dia de hoje. Arno Reis, presente. Henrique Sintra Ferreira, presente. Vânio José de Matos, presente. João Leonardo da Silva Rocha, presente. Alexandre Vanucci Leme, presente. Em nome de todos eles, conclamamos: ditadura nunca mais. Não obstante, ecoamos a memória de toda a juventude negra e periférica que teve seus corpos e os seus sonhos assassinados pela violência do Estado. Sim, é preciso lembrar de todos aqueles que foram esquecidos pelo Estado de Direito. João Pedro, Chico Mendes, Dom e Bruno, Marielle Franco. Neste ato histórico, pisamos no mesmo terreno sobre o qual Luiz Gama aprendeu a lutar por um país sem reis e sem escravos. É uma enorme honra, ao 11 de agosto, continuar sendo construtor da Estrada da Liberdade, de qual Gama foi pedra fundamental. Como afirmou outro mestre negro originado pelos Brasis presentes no Brasil, uma palavra puxa a outra, uma ideia traz a outra, e assim se faz um livro, um governo ou uma revolução. É com esse espírito de luta que iremos derrotar o ódio, que barraremos o fascismo nas urnas e nas ruas. Fazemos um chamado a cada estudante brasileiro. Estejam em alerta, preparados e fortes. Ocuparemos as ruas em defesa das liberdades democráticas e dos nossos direitos. É por meio do sonho da juventude que a flor da democracia rasgará a rua. Viva a juventude, os estudantes e o movimento estudantil. Muito obrigada.
Muito obrigada, Manuela. Salve, salve, todos e todas, todos os estudantes desse Brasil. E dando prosseguimento ao nosso ato, nós vamos chamar aqui o diretor da Faculdade de Direito na Universidade de São Paulo, professor Celso Campilon.
Okay, well, I think you probably all have this link if you want to carry on watching this. It's going to go on forever. You can already see. We had at least a really interesting speech by the president of the Students Association, this really young girl, who was highlighting something which this letter does, and Goffredo's letter in 1977 didn't, which I think is a really important illustration of how Brazil has changed in these 30 years. And it would be a shame if we went back now to where we were, which is the inclusion of socioeconomic issues in the idea of democracy. I think she highlighted really nicely there that democracy is not just this formal thing of voting every 4 years in elections, but it is what the Constitution of 1988 promised to deliver: health, education, equality. And Brazil is sadly still one of the most unequal countries in the world. So she was highlighting how it's a changed environment, even at USP, where I studied, as I mentioned, in 1998. I think I had one black colleague out of 450. Now there are several, including the president, the former president of the Students Association, and this one and many others that managed to go to university through the quota system and some of the measures taken during this first 30 years. So I think we heard perhaps the most important speech of all of these speeches that will be there. So I wanted to finish this because we are approaching 4 by thanking again all the people who came here today, thanking all those who joined online, and saying that this is not the end of it, right? It's hopefully just the continuation, maybe the beginning for some, I'm not sure, but the continuation of this struggle to have democracy, not just in Brazil, but in the world. Democracy is at peril in many places, but there are also lots of people willing and able to resist like us. So thank you so much again, and enjoy the rest of this really hot Thursday. Thank you.